Hey folks, this is Chris Moe with the Pirogue Lodge. This is a little Pirogue log extra. And the reason I wanted to do the extra is blowing a spec call is something I think every hunter needs to learn how to do, because once you can blow a spec call, it's one of the funnest hunts you can ever have. You know, watching those specs coming in because you're making the call.
Yep.
And it's oftentimes pretty hard to blow a spec call. This is a spec call. Not an expensive one. It's just a regular old spec call that John picked up at one of the local stores here. Our friends over at G&H Outdoors, and I'm going to let him show you what he'll do to this call to make it a lot easier for you to blow. So John, what do you do to these things?
Well, what I do is I take the call apart and I take the reed out and I trim the reeds a little bit different. Most of the reeds these days are round. There's a few square tip reeds. I grew up blowing a Shanghai, and Mervis used to use Delrin to make his reeds, and it's a harder plastic, and they were square on the end. So one day I was sitting around and trying to blow one of these calls, and just couldn't get it to sound right. So I said, you know what? So let me play around with this. So I got a pair of scissors and I started tinkering with the reed, and I squared the reed up a little bit, put it back together. I make a cut, put it back together, I blow it. Sounded a little bit better. I'm like, okay, that's cool. So I took it off, maybe trim a little bit more off, put it back together and blow it. And then finally I trimmed the sides on a little bit too, which made it a lot easier to blow, a lot easier to break over, and a lot easier to make all three sounds that a lot of people like to, the hail call, the cluck, and the murmur, with this call. And it's really easy to transition from one to the other, while you're going through your cadence on your call. And also, I'll show you how we do this.
Blow that call before you do the reed.
All right, so that's before. I'll show y'all what I do after. Now what you do is you get you a pair of scissors or a punch or something like that, and you put it in here and you find the wedge, and you put the pointed end on the whatever it is you're using to push the wedge out. So you want to get the wedge out first. So it's right there. You kind of pop it down. Oh, there goes the wedge. That's another thing. Do it in a place where you're not going to lose the wedge, like in the house. Not in the field, so all right, so we got all the different parts here. We got the throat, we got the wedge, we got the reed. Okay, so what I do is, this one's actually, I take it and I trim the very edge of it, get that round part off of it. Okay, I mean, when I tell you I'm cutting the edge of it, you need a sharp pair of scissors, because you're shaving pieces off of this thing about the size of a hair. Because you don't want to cut too much of it, because then you're going to have problems with setting the reed back in when you do take it apart. All right, and then what I'll do is I'll take it on the side here, and I take my scissors and I put it right on the edge of the flat part I cut out of the reed, and I put it just to where it's barely gripping the scissors like this, and I cock it towards the back side of the reed, and I shave a little bit of it off. Okay, and it's not quite enough, so I'll get in here and I'll shave a little bit more off of it. All right, and then I'll flip it over and do the same thing on this side. Butt it up right up next to the flat part. You don't want to go into the flat part. You just want to butt the scissors up to the edge of it, and you want to trim. Very minute piece. Okay, so when I tell you minute pieces, well, I even lost it.
But look like the size of a hair.
It is. I mean, they're very small. So when you're done, you look at both sides of it where you've been shaving, and you want to make sure both sides are pretty close. You see how one side is offset a little bit more than the other? It means I need to turn it over and line this thing back up. Butt it right up against the square part and take a little bit more off of it. Not much. But you want your lines to be about the same on it. About like that. All right, and you turn around and you take this. Now most of these reeds these days, a lot of them are cut to where when you put it back on the tone board, you butt it up against the back of the tone board like this, and you get the wedge, and you put the wedge on it, and you push the reed all the way up and see where it falls on there. And you can see the throat in the tone board. You can see where it's at, and you want that tip to sit right on the edge of that.
Throat.
Yep, right on the top of the throat. I mean, sometimes even having just barely a little bit of that throat where it starts sticking out works good. You push it all
Show
back.
the folks at home on the, you know, the, like, just hold it so that, yeah, okay.
So you can kind of get an idea where it's at. Another good deal is take a permanent marker or a pen and you can mark this wedge. If you're ever worried about putting your call back together, and you put a black mark right here or whatever, something you can see, and then that way when you put your reed back in, you pitch down on the reed and hold it right on that mark when you're pushing your wedge in. So just another little trick you learn over the years of taking calls apart and putting them back together and not remembering exactly how to do it. So all right, so we close it up.
So I noticed it's got a different tone now.
It does.
It's not
much
as
different.
high a pitch.
No, it's a little bit
It's a
raspier.
much lower pitch tone,
yep.
and
much
sounds
easier
more like
to
a
blow.
spec.
Right,
Yeah.
and it's much easier to blow. I mean, you know, and you can play around with the reeds too. Make it a little longer, a little shorter. I mean, that's the thing you do. I mean, you know, you can always buy a reed. I got boxes of them. You know, you can get reeds and you can cut them down however you want, but play with your calls, you know, and get it set up to where you're comfortable blowing it, you know, because what's comfortable for me may not be comfortable for you. And I know the biggest thing from an amateur all the way to a pro, the easier that call is to blow, the more calling you're going to be able to do, or the easier it's going to be for you to learn how to do it.
So that's it, folks. That's how you tune a goose call, make it easier to blow, and then call those geese in so you can get them.
Yep.
Go get the specs.
Get them.